I'm Jason Bradford.
I'm Asher Miller.
And I'm Rob Dietz. Welcome to Crazy Town, where Smokey the Bear's trademark shovel is now a double-barreled shotgun.
Makes sense to me.
Hi, this is producer Melody Allison. Thanks for joining us in Crazy Town, where Jason, Rob, and Asher tackle crazy-making topics like climate change, overshoot, runaway capitalism, and why we're all deluding ourselves. Here's a quick warning. Sometimes this podcast uses swear words.
Language!
Now, on to the show.
Okay, so guys, here we are. New digs. We're doing I think this is season 7 now.
Mm-hmm. Lucky number 7. Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And we're changing things up a little bit. We decided we're not going to be following kind of a season arc, a thematic thing that we're going to do. Instead, we're going to be meeting maybe more periodically. Could be more often, could be less often. We're going to keep people in suspense here. And there's going to be different kinds of provocations for what causes us to get together. In some cases, there's something that's inspiring us, that's exciting us, that we want to talk about. Maybe not a solution, but a response out there that we think is really interesting to share with folks. Mm-hmm. Probably more likely, it's going to be that something is making us feel like we're living in serious crazy town.
We have to process.
And we need to process together. Right?
Which is pretty nonstop. I mean, a little pull back the curtains. These two guys constantly send inflammatory, upsetting articles. And I'm kind of like looking at my phone going, yeah, I'm not going to read that.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm going to read that.
How many of them do you think you actually read?
I'm definitely in the single-digit percentage. I'd say
What?
like maybe 8%.
I read probably
He's not doing his
90%
job
of
at
what
all.
you send me.
Yeah.
Do you read 90% of what I
I read 90% of what I send you.
Thank you.
There's sometimes I don't finish things that I share because I'm so absolutely just infuriated.
Sometimes you just have the headline, the first paragraph, and you're like, yeah, I get that.
Right. Well, I have the AI, thing kind of summarize it for me. Should I be outraged?
All right.
And Google says yes, and then I share it with you guys.
Well, ironically, this episode today is my fault. So I saw
That
a
is
headline.
ironic,
I know. It's we're reversing the flow of traffic.
And you know what? I read what you sent us.
I read it.
I know, because it's rare that I
We're
try
diligent.
to upset you guys.
Yeah,
Because
that's true.
you're already so upset. There's no role for me there.
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to get into this a little bit sideways, okay? So I want to talk a bit about my history. I used to work, as I think you guys know, for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
I thought you were going to talk about working at Toys R Us, because
No,
we've discussed that before.
We're not going that far back, okay? So when I worked there, I interacted with a lot of biologists out at the National Wildlife Refuges. You guys ever visit National Wildlife
Of course.
Refuge?
We talk about this
dude.
all the time.
Yes.
Okay.
Jesus.
Okay. Well, I
Move
just
on.
wanted to give you a chance, Captain Birdwatcher.
Yeah, Findlay National Wildlife Refuge here in the Corvallis, Willamette Valley area.
Okay,
blah,
we're
blah,
not
blah.
asking you to prove your
Basket
bona fides
slew.
here.
Okay, just keep going.
Your bona fides.
See, I would think that the articles you send about the shit show of national politics is upsetting. But for you, I ask a question like, do you ever go to a national wildlife refuge? And you get all like,
I just want to get to your outrage.
okay. Well, so
He's getting outraged.
National wildlife refuges have multiple purposes. They're supposed to provide habitat for fish, for wildlife. They're supposed to
Fish
give
on
you,
wildlife.
give you stopovers for migratory birds. But they pay special attention to threatened and endangered species. Okay, so one time I had a conversation with the manager of San Diego National Wildlife Refuge. Now you can,
The city of San Diego?
yeah, well, it's
Is
near
it
there.
the zoo that they're talking about?
Well, so I think you're getting to the right angle
Yeah.
here. You can imagine how
What's left?
beat up.
What's left?
Yeah, what's left in Southern California for habitat. And so this manager was lamenting. They were like, you know what? I've got one endangered species that eats another endangered species. How am I supposed to protect endangered species? And
Good question.
I really thought about that conversation when I read this headline that I'm bringing to you guys about how the Fish and Wildlife Service has plans to shoot barred owls because they're out competing endangered spotted owls here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
How many are we talking about here?
Oh my God! So it's something like they want to shotgun 50,000 birds, or sorry, 500,000 birds over the next 30 years.
That's a long-term plan.
500,000 birds.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do the math
they like-
on per year.
Yeah, is it like just like an average? They've averaged
Yeah.
that out over 30 years,
Yeah.
or like not ramping up or whatever.
And it's the northern spotted owl, which is a subspecies of spotted owl. There are actually two subspecies of the spotted owl. There's a Mexican, a California, and the northern. So we're talking specifically about the northern. I just
Yeah.
want you to make sure you get these
in
facts straight.
terms of which
Yeah.
species they're trying to protect.
Which
here.
subspecies are working on.
Right.
And this northern spotted owl is really important for protecting old growth forests through the Endangered Species Act.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it. It's the service thinks they're going to hit 15,600 barred owls a year. So this
with
bums
shotgun pellets.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you basically call them in with the whatever, you probably know what noise a barred owl makes.
It's sort of like who cooks for you is sort of the thing. Is how you say, who cook for you?
Nice.
Something like that.
Well
Beautiful,
done.
dude.
Well done.
I can't do Arnold Schwarzenegger, but
But you can do owls.
well, actually, I'm lousy at that. So that might have been a lucky life
I
achievement.
see, one just came out by the window.
Yeah, look at that. It's beautiful.
Where's the shotgun?
So they call them in and then shoot them in the face. And I've heard of
You don't have to say that part.
well, that's what happens. I've heard of
Big face. They have a big face.
the people in conservation. The people in conservation who have to do this work, they're kind of bummed
a little
about it.
traumatizing.
Yeah, seriously, these people didn't sign up to go shoot barded owls in the face, right?
Barred
owls.
not barded.
Yeah.
So
It's like saying Canadian geese.
Geeses.
It's Canada goose.
It's
So-
Canadian geeses.
I thought maybe we could share some ideas on maybe some flaws in this plan or what's wrong with it, or take a systems view of it.
Can we just start by talking about how it feels to read that? I mean, and I was just reacting to it. The idea of these barred owls are beautiful creatures.
Unbelievable.
They're so beautiful.
Yeah.
And the folks that are being tasked with this job, right? 500,000 love nature, presumably, love wildlife. How heinous,
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
to think about this.
This is where I entered the conversation. I was just bummed. I love owls.
Yeah.
I've had several experiences where an owl will fly up and land real close, and you get to really look at it, and those eyes look like they're staring through your soul. Like
Right.
you understand why it became the mythological creature for wisdom. It just looks like a stately, majestic creature.
I mean, but let's talk about why they're doing this, though, because the northern spotted owl, the population is really plummeting. There was a whole thing in the 90s where they stopped logging in old growth forests in the Pacific Northwest because through the Endangered Species Act, if you could document there was an endangered species, which in this case was the northern spotted owl,
Yeah.
then it kicks in all these federal policies. So on federal land, they had to, which is most of the forests in the Pacific Northwest is federal land. It was, okay, stop logging old growth. And now, even with the stopping of the logging of old growth, the barred owl outcompetes the spotted owl.
But let's just back up for a second
Yeah.
about the people have talked about this as the timber wars, right?
Yes, in the 90s,
so
yeah.
much consternation and conflict in this state, the state of
Yeah.
Oregon, where we are,
Yes.
that exist till today. I mean,
Yeah.
if you see some of the political divisions that exist now, there's like a supermajority of Democrats in the Capitol in Salem here, and they're trying to pass legislation around, addressing climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people that were protesting this were people that were directly tied to these timber communities that
Yeah.
are still very bitter.
Yeah, reeling from it. They're still
Basically
closing
saying
mills, yeah.
you care more about this owl than you care about the well-being of these human beings that rely on this timber industry, right? So it's tapping something pretty deep in this community.
Yeah, the feds are going is like, we've got this sunk cost in protecting the spotted owl, and because we did that, all these mills closed. Okay, and we protected old growth forests for all the diversity of the ecosystems and the majesty of the last 2% that's left or whatever. It's pretty pathetic. And now this iconic bird that through our laws force this protection by law may go extinct anyway.
Well, that is definitely where the Fish and Wildlife Service
Yeah.
comes in. They, by law, have to try to protect the spotted owl.
Right. And now that's what's happening is the barred owl.
But
is-
let's not forget that climate is playing a role too, because why is the
Of
habitat,
course.
even though they've stopped logging, you have a lot more wildfires raging through those forests because it's hotter now.
So I had a couple of reactions, in reading this. A few. One was that emotional reaction of just how sad this is.
Yeah.
And then the other was thinking it's what you brought up earlier, when you're talking about to the guy that in San Diego, just you're making me choose between these two species, right? And maybe the barred owl is not endangered, but we can't say that it probably has a thriving situation. Maybe it does, but pitting these two species sort of against each other feels weird. And my reaction was like, this is a bad idea, which maybe we could talk about why it might be a bad idea.
Yeah.
But then I was also struck by the irony of what I just talked about, which is a lot of us envirotypes, we're very happy to, shut down timber
Right.
to protect the spotted owl.
And now we're
Now
mad.
we're upset about taking this,
Well, and we've covered invasive species some
Yeah.
in previous seasons, but this is a little bit different. I mean, let's talk about invasive species for a sec. If you bring over pythons, say in the pet trade from its native habitat across
Right.
the ocean,
I've done it a few times.
and you release
it's
it in the
expensive.
But I mean, they get released in the Everglades and they expand
And they eat
start,
the cats and the dogs.
Yeah, and they start eating.
Oh.
Okay, we're not.
Sorry.
Pulling back. So they wreak havoc, and you're kind of like, okay, we should do something to control them. This is different from a species that occurs naturally and is flying across the country.
And yeah, this is one of the things is that the barred owl is native to eastern North America for sure. And the idea is that things change with, humans getting railroads and development and forest changes sort of allowed somehow the barred owl to really move across the west. And it's been kind of moving through sort of the boreal forest, and now it's moving down along the Pacific Northwest. So what is native, so to speak.
right.
Is it just natural expansion, or
Yeah,
do you think there's
it
something
I think
driving?
there's debates about this. There's debates.
Yeah, there's some complicating factors. I mean, one is that the owl's habitat in the east and the Midwest was being decimated. So,
Right.
of course, it's fanning out looking for more habitat.
Yeah.
Another is some people have looked at the genomics and come to the conclusion that the owls have actually been in the West, barred owls, for maybe thousands of years.
Yeah, and it's a new report. It may be controversial, but there's some evidence they may have been here actually a long time, and now they're doing a new range expansion of some kind for some reason, and we don't really know. That's what's so crazy.
Yeah.
So, just a question: do you think the justification is this is actually not a native species,
Exactly.
so that's why we're going to get rid of, or if they let's say
the
they
San
had
Diego
equal,
thing.
let's say they had equal standing. They've been
Right.
here as long as each other.
Right.
This is reminding me about geopolitical
Yeah,
debates, by the way,
yeah,
that I don't want to get into right now. But let's say they, both of these species have a claim
Yeah, to the land.
to indigeneity, this land.
Yeah.
Would they still feel like, because one is endangered and the other is not, that they would take the same recourse?
Yeah, by law, they
Yeah.
would basically have to. I mean, you don't have to shoot them in the face with a shotgun.
Stop.
But you would have to
You just
do.
kneacap them.
You would have to do
sterilize
something.
them.
Yeah, and that's what they talk about. Maybe someday we can do sterilization.
But back to-
our chemtrails or something like that.
But it's back to Asher's point. You sort of have to pick the winner and the loser in this battle, and that doesn't feel like something that is sustainable over the long term, given how much damage we have wrought on the landscape and how much more we're going to.
This is what gets me. Is like, of course, if you are a bureaucrat and you're imagining the U.S. federal government will exist as is with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I don't know why they call it U.S. Fish and Wildlife, because fish are wildlife. This pisses me off. But anyhow,
Fish and other wildlife.
okay, the idea that we're going to have a functioning federal government that can regulate, endangered species in for the next 30 plus, they think this is ongoing. This is in perpetuity. They're always going to have to do this. So after 30 years, they'll reevaluate, and then they might have to up the numbers or whatever. But that's what gets me is like, I just don't buy that we're even going to have the administrative state at this scale. You know, I sound very Kunslerian now.
You don't buy the existence of the administrative state. I don't buy the assumption that everything else, relatively speaking, in 30 years is going to be just fine for, you know, the spotted owl.
Right.
Like, I mean, what's going to change in terms of climate or other, you know, biodiversity issues? Or 30 years is a long friggin' time
Given
in the context
rate
of what's
change.
happening.
Yeah.
I can think of one benefit here, though. You know those guys that took over the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, the Bundys?
Bundy buddies.
They're about to come in.
If you,
Guys.
if you had, I actually looked at the door. I'm like, what? if you had a bunch of owl shooters on your national wildlife refuge, they could have defended against the Bundys.
There we go.
We got a stronger administrative state now.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, let's, instead of working against them, let's work with those guys. They like to shoot things, so let's have them shoot owls.
No, I'm saying we would have been able to defend our refuge against the nutters trying to
Another invasive species.
Yeah.
It feels like an impossible situation because there are these assumptions that Jason, you and I were just talking about here that we can question. But there's something else happening, which is what you brought up, Rob, and that is within the context of the current system and the structures of that system that we have right now. We talked last season so much about, you know, infrastructure, structure, and superstructure.
Yeah, don't say that again. I'm so tired of it.
Structure in this case, which is the Endangered Species Act.
God, he said structure.
It's a law.
It's a law.
Right? It's all these guys have to do. These people have to do this.
They're doing their job, Rob.
So, of course, they need to have plans for 30 years. That's what they're probably expected to do. That's probably the time frame that's mandated to them when they're coming up with these things. So, they're being rational in this case.
Yeah.
It is rational and it is what they have to do. But this is, in my opinion, what needs to change, because this whole like pitting species against each other, it doesn't make any sense from a systems viewpoint. I'll give you another example. I had a friend come to town and his son loves fishing. So we went out into the Sandy River.
Nice.
And we're wandering around fishing, and he and I both caught...
Did you bring dynamite with
No,
you?
we did not. Oh. We were using a fishing rod. We both caught a pike minnow.
Those are big.
Northern pike minnow. They can get pretty big. But
How big was yours?
about a foot long.
That's not too bad. I mean, they get a lot bigger.
Yes, but this is something I did not know, okay? There is a bounty on pike minnow in the Columbia River.
So you got paid.
You can. The rewards range from $6 to $10 per fish. And you can even, on a single fish, if it's tagged, you could get $500
Wait,
for
if
it.
it's tagged, why is it still alive?
Because they're, I think, wanting to know how often they get caught as a population.
Oh, that's pretty
estimate,
funny.
Yeah.
But you get $500.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing. Northern pike minnow are native. This is not an invasive species, but they eat a lot of salmon, eggs, and young salmon fry. So in 2023, the top 20 anglers for this pike minnow bounty program.
This is going to be good.
Was this aired on ESPN Plus?
Probably. So these guys caught an average of 4,005 fish.
Yeah.
And averaged payments of $40,135 over a 5-month season.
Oh my goodness.
The highest paid angler.
This is a company. Here you have your birding thing. You're always talking to us about your bird standing, you know, your
not
property.
always talking about
yes,
this.
you are. And where you rank in the state. You're
God,
not getting paid shit, buddy.
I must be insufferable.
No, you're insufferable, but you're poor. You're not even doing it for the right reasons. You could be making money.
Just wait. I didn't even tell you the highest earner.
Okay.
This person got $107,000.
That's 6 figures, baby.
Yeah,
Nice.
for fishing for pike minnow
8
for
with
5
decimals.
months.
Wow.
And then can you sell them? Eat them?
No, you could eat them, but you have to report it back to.
You report it, but what do you do with the fish?
You dump a load of fish on their
You have to dump it?
You can.
I don't know how you turn it in. Maybe there's photographic evidence.
Yeah, can you just photograph? This one's Billy, this one's Bob. Like,
So the point
I want
is,
details.
we've decimated salmon because of dams,
Right.
because of
Yeah.
all kinds of problems and overfishing and whatnot.
Blah,
and so
blah.
Now we're going to go kill pike minnow because they're just doing what they do ecologically.
There's a precedence then for the barred owl thing. So what are you getting off?
So my point is, we're never going to solve.
Where's the bounty for the barred owl?
We're never going to solve these problems until we are thinking and acting more systemically. So this takes me back to something I did when I was with the Fish and Wildlife Service. We worked on the idea of, instead of targeting little species here, species there, what you need to do is set aside representative samples of every kind of habitat on a continental scale. You need representative chunks, preferably connected so animals can travel, plants can disperse. And I even wrote a paper with a colleague, Brian Check. It was called Conservation Deficits for the Continental United States.
Did you do some GIS work for that?
Did do some geographic information systems.
I think you need to mention something about this. Your co-author and you both went on a different journey, right?
Yeah, I mean, we realized that the causes of all these problems and why you have decimated habitat is the economy has expanded exponentially for centuries now, and the only plan is to keep expanding it. Yeah. So we kind of were saying, make the transition to a smaller economy, a steady state economy that's within the bounds that...
Right, and Brian went off and started an organization that I know you worked with for a while, and you wrote a book on the topic. It's just interesting that... I don't know if this is the origin story of that, but...
Well, it's part of it, because, I mean, what we found in that study was that we classified the landscape into different kinds of ecosystems, and on average, each one had about 4% of its land area in the network of conservation lands. 4%.
Now, I wonder if you overlaid indigenous populations and what percentage of their historic land they still inhabit, if the percentage is close to matching.
I mean, it's probably worse. I mean, the way they were booted off of their historic land. But, you know, the upshot of a study like that is we need to upgrade our network of conservation lands. It should be doing better to have a representation across the landscape. So we need legislation. We talked about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is following the law, right? Endangered Species Act. Well, that was a great law, and all the great environmental laws that were passed
50 years old.
Yeah, like in Richard Nixon's era. Yeah, it's like, okay, time to innovate again. Let's get laws that are systemic and
so it's about protecting the ecosystem that the spotted owl is in. And then you don't worry so much about the individual species is the idea that you're kind of leading towards, which I think a lot of people that work for fish and wildlife would agree would be a great thing. But, you're hampered by
Do you think there's a fish camp and a wildlife camp within the department and they're kind of like at each other a little bit?
Well, he might know. I mean, he was
it is divided into sort of 4 groups. So one is fish, one is migratory birds, one is threatened and endangered species, and the other is the refuges.
Do they have softball teams?
Let's say you get these representative habitats and No, I was going to say that politically, there's no way that's going to happen right now. Okay. All right. Be realistic.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
I would say political impossibility.
I've got to respond to that.
Now,
in a
imagine
second.
even that it did happen and you grew it to these representative areas. What we're going to see in terms of like turnover, in terms of populations and species, climatic envelopes, and then let's imagine the breakdown in the kind of breakdown I'm thinking is going to happen in, say, 30 years in society in general, and what that means for ecosystems. I think what you have to frame it as, you need to give natural systems, what I mean by natural is they are diverse and able to go through adaptive change. And the idea being that if you have a lot of diversity, you have good, species richness, trophic structures, and the entities there, the populations there are able to then react to each other and to a changing environment so that they can maintain function and migrate and move and regenerate as you have all these changes occurring. You're like, that's what we need. I mean, that's what I think we should be aiming for.
Well, that is the way that that idea of having representative chunks of habitat would work, because then you are not bound to oh, we have to protect that species,
Right.
which if we're going to do that means we've got to kill this species or we've got to manage that other
Yes.
species. Because you can think about what a Rube Goldberg machine that
Yes.
turns into over time and how
Yeah.
we're just not that good. We're not going to be able, and what are you even aiming for? What's the baseline numbers of species that you're trying to, sort of manipulate on the landscape? No, you just have what you're talking about, Jace, at least as I understand it, functioning habitats with a good species mix it's allowed to evolve because the climate genie is out of the bottle, so things are going to have to adapt.
Now, what does frighten me in this, in my
Fish
scenario,
and wildlife, I should say.
Thank you. What does frighten me in this scenario is that the invasive species situation is so bad that, and this is where I get really sad because I don't know, without all the interventions we're doing right now, I mean, we're making it worse, of course, with global trade and habitat modification and road building and all this. We're making it worse all the time. But we also have this countervailing force of people going out with backpack sprayers and with native seed mixes. And, there's all these people also fighting to rebuild habitat. And they can be very successful in places. We've seen this locally. It's quite remarkable. And I just think about, we lose that as well in the scenario I'm talking about. And there's no check on, tamarisk in the Southwest. There's no check on reed canary grass in the wetlands or purple loosestrife. We're doing all this stuff right now to try to prevent those things from making monocultures in wetlands, and in riparian zones. We're going to lose, I just think we're going to lose that battle too. And that just, how many millions of years until we get diversity back?
So
Anyway, I'm getting depressed.
This, to me, the more I think about this, the more of a conundrum this seems, and the more indicative it is of the larger conundrum that we face now. And that is, so to me, because I'm not steeped in this world, but when you describe basically protection of ecosystems or regions, areas, seems like a step in the right direction in the sense that we're not trying to pick winners and losers. We're trying to let ecosystems thrive and create opportunity for them to find their own balance, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that feels less hubristic on the part of humans, less humanocentric. We talked about all that. That feels like a step in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And I also look at the situation and I think the idea of control, because inherent in all of the things that we're talking about here is this idea that we can control outcomes on some level. And that we probably have to let go of that too. Because, and it's not just letting go of the sense of control of the fate of other species that we've decided is in our hands, right? It's letting go of, the idea that we can protect even humans, you know, in terms of what's coming. So that feels generally like a step in the right direction. And at the same time, are we really now going to let the winners of this be invasive species that are not native to this land that now can completely thrive? And
I think we're going to fight that, but I just think we're going to lose.
Off?
I think we're going to lose. I don't think we're going to have the ability to control it. That's what I'm saying. That's what makes me sad. It's in some ways.
But whether we lose or not, I guess my point is, what is our approach? What are our values? What are we saying we should be investing in? Does that make sense? Where do we draw the line? Do we say, because we could say, fuck it, man. We can't, all this is out of our control. Let's just say it's out of our hands, we can't do anything.
I know what I do is I fight as long as I can and then I die.
Well, I like that question because one of the values, and you were bringing it up with humanocentrism, we need to let go of this notion that we get to do whatever the hell we want on the landscape. That back to the timber wars, we extracted too much timber. I'm not saying don't ever use wood, but the amount that we clear cut, it was too much, right? And that's the problem with runaway exponential growth is you exploit and extract too much. So we've got to have this time where we say, okay, that's enough. We've got to let go of this human supremacy, recognize that we're part of something greater. And again, that gets back to let's have that reverence for nature, which a lot of people have. And I kind of want to end with this because we had an experience with a barred owl recently. I was staying over at your place, Jason. We went out onto the trail system along the riparian forest there and spotted, that's funny, we spotted a barred owl.
That was a good one.
We saw a barred owl sitting not too high up in a tree, and
it was very exciting. So
Jason was just...
I thought at first it was a great horned owl because there's a lot of great horned owls. And so I kind of like, we were walking at the edge of the forest and I saw this owl fly and I thought, oh, it must be a great horned owl. But then what happened?
Yeah, then you showed it to me. I said, that's not a great horned owl. There's no horns.
We kept walking and then we came back and then it was, oh, it's there still.
Yeah, no ear tufts.
I was looking at it and I went, that's not a great horned owl.
And you had never seen one on the property.
I'd never seen a barred owl before. I'd heard it.
So the insufferable thing, Asher, that you're saying Jason has become, he was like, it was actually cute to watch.
Joy.
He was kind of like...
True joy, right?
He was really happy for the rest of the day, not depressed like you are now. And so that's the thing. Like, if we have that reverence...
It just sat there looking at us and we can get pretty close. We looked at it and we were staring at each other.
Yeah, it's pretty hard then to conclude that rather than using binoculars, you should have pulled out the double-barreled shotgun and blown it away, right? So
what if they were offering $1,000?
Oh, I mean, $5-10 for a pikeman, no, it's not enough for the barred owl.
No.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need more. Jeez, what am I talking about?
That's our show. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard and you want others to consider these issues, then please share Crazy Town with your friends. Hit that share button in your podcast app or just tell them face to face. Maybe you can start some much needed conversations and do some things together to get us out of Crazy Town. Thanks again for listening and sharing.
You wouldn't go into a boxing match without training. So don't expect to be ready for the complete breakdown of the industrial food system either, which would usher in a period of highly simplified food choices when eating local and seasonal is your only option. To train you up, Iron Pitchfork is ready to serve your family by conveniently shipping a food ration weekly right to your doorstep. But this isn't anything like other meal services. With Iron Pitchfork, you only get one kind of food each month. It's now about survival, not convenience and taste, and you better appreciate calories of any kind or you are going to die. Before it is absolutely necessary, get familiar with eating 7 pounds of potatoes per day. Discover the wonders a month on rutabaga will do for you. Don't be alarmed at the color of your toilet water during beet month. You'll learn the intricacies of calorie preservation when you have to thresh a bundle of wheat before eating it. Sure, it would be nice to have beans and grains, but you only get one or the other. Deal with it. Iron Pitchfork. At least you aren't starving, right?
Crazy town, da 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 da, crazy town.